If you're a woman over 60, if you've ever felt invisible, discarded, or unloved after giving your life to someone, stay with me. Because what happened to me might feel like fiction, but I promise, it's someone's truth. Maybe even yours. Please like, share, and subscribe. These stories matter. My name is Lorraine. I'm 67 years old, and last winter, my husband of 38 years looked me in the eye and told me he was leaving me for a woman younger than our daughter. He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it with regret. He said it with a smirk, like it was a promotion he'd earned, and I was the outdated model. "I've wasted my youth taking care of you," I whispered. But he just laughed and said, "You were never the reason I succeeded, Lorraine. I just tolerated you." Let me tell you about the kind of tolerance I lived through. I raised our children. I took care of his mother when she was dying. I worked part-time, saved every penny, and supported his business when he had nothing but a shed and a dream. I packed lunches while he took client dinners with women in tight dresses. I aged. I gave. I stayed loyal. And he walked away the moment my hair turned silver. He didn't just leave. He evicted me from our own home. The house I helped pay for. The house I cleaned, cooked in, cried in. Legally, it was in his name. I had nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a small pension. And guess what? My own children, our son and daughter, sided with him. "Dad says you've been unstable lately," my daughter said over the phone, as if being betrayed didn't justify the breakdown I had. My son? He stopped answering altogether. And so, at 67, I moved into a motel. Alone. With 3 changes of clothes, 1 bottle of cheap shampoo, and a heart so heavy I thought it might stop beating out of mercy. I wanted to scream into the night. Why did no one warn me? Why didn't anyone tell me that aging as a woman meant becoming invisible, even to the people you gave your life to? But that's not where the story ends. No. This is just chapter 1. Because somewhere between the broken motel mirror and the first snow of winter, something happened. A moment. A message. A chance. And I took it. They thought I was finished. They had no idea who they were leaving behind. Stay with me. Chapter 2 will break your heart a little more before I show you how I took it all back. And please, if you've ever felt forgotten or betrayed, like, share, and subscribe. Let's make sure no woman over 60 ever feels alone again. Chapter 2. When the motel mirror cracked. I didn't cry that first night in the motel. You'd think I would have. Wept into the thin pillow, screamed into the mattress, called someone. But no one was left to call, and I think the pain was so sharp it numbed me. I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the cracked mirror across from me. And for the first time in years, I really looked at myself. 67. Wrinkles, yes. Hair thinning. But the sadness, that was the loudest thing on my face. A kind of sadness you can't wear makeup over. A quiet, hollow look, like ID stopped mattering the moment I stopped being useful. I'd spent nearly 4 decades making sure everyone else had a place to land. Now I had nowhere. And do you want to hear the cruelest part? My husband, Stephen, didn't just take the house. He cut off the joint accounts, said I could figure it out since I'd never worked hard enough to earn it. Imagine that. After running his books, managing his schedule, building his brand from our kitchen table. I hadn't worked hard enough. I applied for government assistance, but the waiting list was months long. Every day felt like a punishment for trusting a man I once thought was my future. And then came the worst day. The motel manager knocked on my door. Said Stephen had called in advance and only paid for 1 week. "You'll need to check out by tomorrow morning," he said, almost apologetically. "Sorry, ma'am. Sorry." I heard that word a lot. From strangers. From receptionists. From bank clerks. But never from Stephen. Not once. That night, I walked for hours around the city, clutching my coat tight as the cold bit through me. I thought about sleeping at the bus station. I thought about just disappearing. But then right as I passed a shuttered bookstore downtown, I saw it. A sign taped to the window. Handwritten, curling at the edges. Caretaker wanted. Apartment included. Apply inside. I pressed my hand against the glass. My reflection stared back, broken, tired, and scared. But I went in. That job? That apartment? It didn't just save me. It started something I didn't expect. Something I'd almost forgotten was possible. A miracle. But I'll tell you more in Chapter 3. This is where the shift begins, where the woman they all abandoned finds herself again, and slowly learns how to make them regret it. If my story feels like yours, don't scroll away. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Like it. Subscribe. Because we've all been made to feel invisible after 60. But I promise, there's still power in our stories. Chapter 3. The apartment above the forgotten bookstore. I never imagined the first kindness I'd receive after being thrown away by my own family would come from a stranger named Harold with nicotine-stained fingers and a limp in his left leg. He owned the bookstore. Or rather, what was left of it. Been in the family since '62, he told me as I stepped inside that night, but no one reads anymore. Not unless it's glowing on a screen. I didn't have a resume. Just trembling hands and the weight of humiliation in my voice when I said, I can clean. Organize. I'm good with old things. Harold looked me over like he'd seen my story written across my face. And then he said something that made my breath catch. You need this more than I need help. He gave me the keys to the upstairs apartment that night. It wasn't much, creaky floors, faded wallpaper, a toilet that hissed like a snake when you flushed, but it was mine. A place where no one yelled. No one mocked my silence. No one asked why my skin was sagging or why I didn't just get over it. That first night in the apartment, I curled up on the old couch, wrapped in a second-hand quilt, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not out of comfort, but out of sheer exhaustion from being discarded, from being told I was too old, too useless, too invisible to matter. And then, something strange happened. The next morning, I found a small stack of letters in the kitchen drawer, yellowed with time. Most were unopened, all addressed to someone named Beatrice. I asked Harold about them. He shrugged. Previous tenant. Disappeared 10 years ago. Folks around here say she went mad after her husband ran off with her nurse. My heart clenched. Another discarded woman. Another forgotten name. I sat with those letters for hours. Reading them felt like peeling back layers of my own life, words filled with grief, betrayal, and loneliness. I cried harder reading Beatrice's letters than I ever did for Stephen. Because her pain was my pain. Her voice sounded like mine. And right then, something shifted. I decided I'd write my own letters. Not to Stephen. Not to my children. To women like me. Women who've given their lives and been left behind. Women who go quiet because they've been told no one's listening. I wrote my first letter that afternoon and taped it to the bookstore's front door. Just 5 lines. If you've been forgotten, I see you. If you've been broken, you're not alone. We survive. We heal. We rise. Come talk to me, upstairs. I didn't think anyone would read it. But the next morning, someone knocked on my door. A woman. Maybe 70. Holding one of my notes in her hand. Eyes red. Voice trembling. I think I'm Beatrice's sister. This was the beginning of something bigger than I understood then. And Stephen? My husband? He had no idea the woman he left behind was about to become the voice for every woman he thought didn't matter. Come back for Chapter 4. You won't believe what happens when the women who've been silenced start speaking again. And please share the story. Like and subscribe. Because maybe there's someone out there right now sleeping on a stranger's couch, believing her life ended at 60. She needs to know it didn't. Chapter 4. The Women Who Whispered in the Dark. The woman at my door called herself Nancy. She was small, sharp-featured, with hands that trembled as she clutched the edge of her coat. Beatrice was my sister, she said. I saw your note. I had to come. We sat at my tiny kitchen table. She told me about Beatrice. About how her husband had stripped everything from her, money, reputation, even the house she'd inherited. About how Beatrice had slowly slipped out of the world, written desperate letters to people who never wrote back, and then one day, just stopped being heard. I listened. Not because I had answers, but because I knew the silence that follows abandonment. That dead space no one else hears, the kind where your own voice starts to sound foreign to you. That afternoon, Nancy left in tears. But she smiled before she did. "You reminded me of her," she said. But stronger. Louder. Like she might have been if someone had listened. After that, something strange started happening. The note I had taped to the bookstore door? It kept disappearing. At first I thought it was the wind. Or kids tearing it down. But then a new woman showed up. Then another. Then 3 more. Each holding the words I wrote. Each with her own story of cruelty. Some had been left by their husbands for secretaries or nurses. Some had been financially cut off by their own children. Some hadn't spoken to a soul in weeks. They were all over 60. And they all said the same thing. No one listens to us anymore. I started calling them the Whisper Circle. We met once a week in the dusty back room of the bookstore. No fancy tea. No therapy talk. Just truth. Raw, painful truth. And it grew. Women brought friends. Friends brought neighbors. I started getting letters slipped under my door. My daughter said I'm a burden. My husband calls me useless now that I've stopped working. My son blocked me after I refused to sell my house to him. I read everyone. Because I was them. And the more we met, the more we shared, the more something began to take root strength. These weren't weak women. These were warriors in disguise. Silenced, sidelined, and underestimated. And just when I thought this little circle of broken voices was the only miracle I'd get, Stephen called. After 3 months of silence. I stared at the phone like it had grown teeth. I didn't pick up. Not yet. But I knew then something must have gone wrong. And suddenly I wasn't trembling anymore. Because while he'd been busy spending my silence, I had found something far more valuable. My voice. Come back for chapter 5. The man who discarded me? He's about to realize he made the biggest mistake of his life. And if you're still with me, please share this story. Like it. Subscribe. Not for me, but for every woman who thinks her story doesn't matter. Because it does. You do. Chapter 5. His Empire, My Silence. I didn't answer his call. Not out of fear. But because for once, I wanted him to wait. To sit in silence. To feel that hollow echo I'd lived in for months. Stephen called again. And again. Left a message. Lorraine. I just need to talk. It's important. Important? The last thing he told me was that I'd ruined his best years. That I was lucky he didn't throw my things out onto the lawn. Now he needed to talk? I listened to the message once, then deleted it. I won't lie to you, I felt something close to pleasure. Not revenge, not yet, but the first flicker of power returning to my chest. I didn't call him back. Instead, I poured my tea and walked into the bookstore, where 6 women were waiting. Marjorie had just found out her son forged her signature to take a loan. Alice had been told by her husband to start planning for a nursing home. Ruth was evicted from the house she built because it was in her son-in-law's name. These were stories America doesn't talk about. Because who wants to hear about old women being betrayed? You do. You stayed. Thank you. By week's end, I had 12 women sitting in a circle of folding chairs. Each one gripping a piece of paper. Each one writing their story. I called it the Ledger of the Forgotten, but something kept tugging at my attention. Stephen's calls. His voicemails started to shift. Lorraine, I think there's been a mistake with the business. We might be facing a lawsuit. Then, finally, please. I need your signature to release the joint business account. You're still on the documents. Lorraine, please. Oh, how the tables turn. He had forgotten. After all the years I spent building his bookkeeping system, managing the paperwork. I had never taken my name off the master account, because I never thought he'd betray me. That account held over $2 million. And now? He couldn't touch a single dollar of it without my consent. I sat with that fact for a long while. Let it breathe. He thought I was invisible, replaceable, erased. But in the fine print of his empire, I still existed. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "You may have left me with nothing," but I never stopped paying attention. Come back for chapter 6. Because when a discarded woman holds the key to the very thing that man built his ego on, the fallout is not quiet. Please like, share, and subscribe, because someone out there needs to know. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Chapter 6. What he built on my back. The first time Stephen called me his rock, I believed him. It was 20 years ago when the business first turned a profit. I remember he came home late with a bottle of cheap champagne and said, "Lorraine, none of this would have happened without you." Back then, I thought love sounded like gratitude. Now I know it was performance. Because the second his business became successful, he rewrote the story. He became the genius. I became the deadweight. The one who never understood numbers, even though I built the spreadsheets, paid the invoices, and filed the taxes. And now? Now that the IRS was breathing down his neck and a vendor had filed suit for unpaid dues, he was back, looking for the same rock he once stood on. But this time, I was the one holding the ground. I made a quiet call to the bank, asked for all the account activity, got a notarized statement that confirmed I was still a 50% co-owner. Then I made a second call to a lawyer, a woman named Camille who used to come to our Whisper Circle meetings before she got her confidence back. She said, "You ready to make him sweat?" I smiled. For the first time in months, I smiled. We filed an injunction, froze the account, cited financial abuse, cited abandonment. My signature wasn't needed anymore because I was declaring a breach of fiduciary duty. Big words for one simple truth. He built his fortune on my unpaid labor. And now I was collecting. I didn't tell him. I let him wonder why the transactions weren't going through. Let him panic. Let him sweat under the weight of what it meant to lose control. While he unraveled, I got a call from my daughter. Not to apologize. To beg. "Mom, Dad says you're blocking the account. We could lose the house. Can you just sign whatever he needs?" I asked her a question I already knew the answer to. "Did you know what he did to me?" Silence. Then, "It's complicated, Mom." "No, sweetheart. It's not. It's betrayal. And you watched it happen." I hung up without another word. And for the first time since they discarded me, I felt something warm in my chest, not bitterness. Justice. Come back for chapter 7. Because justice is only the beginning. Please like this story, share it, and subscribe so the next woman who's gaslit into thinking her labor was worthless remembers just how powerful she really is. Chapter 7. When the house of cards trembled. He always thought I wouldn't fight back. Stephen used to say things like, "Lorraine doesn't like conflict," or "She's too soft-hearted to cause trouble." He confused silence for surrender. He mistook my love for weakness. But now that his house of cards was shaking, he started changing his tone. The voicemails came faster, Messier. No more arrogance. Just desperation. "Lorraine, the account's frozen. I can't pay my suppliers. Do you understand what this means? My business is collapsing. Just call me back, please. Please." I played that message twice. Not to laugh, no, I'm not cruel. But to remind myself what it felt like when I was the one begging him not to leave me alone in that motel. He never once said please then. It's funny how men who break you without blinking suddenly become humble when they realize you've still got the matchbook to the life they built. That week, my lawyer Camille received a furious email from Stephen's team. Threats. Manipulation. Claims that I was mentally unstable, incapable of making legal decisions. Same old script. When women resist, label them crazy. But Camille didn't flinch. She responded with documentation, ledgers, tax filings, emails, all signed by me. 40 years of silent contribution laid bare. Line by line. They had nothing. No ground to stand on. Meanwhile, back in the bookstore, our Whisper Circle had doubled. Women came in from neighboring towns. A few drove 2 hours just to sit in that dusty back room and say the things they'd never dared say before. One woman, Helen, broke down sobbing after reading her journal aloud. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. I held her hand and told her we were never alone. They just made sure we stayed isolated so we couldn't see our strength. And then it happened. A local paper picked up the story. Not of me and Stephen, but of the Whisper Circle. The headline read, "Elder Women Find Voice in Forgotten Bookstore, The Power of Shared Survival." It was small, tucked under the fold, but it mattered, because that article brought more than attention. It brought opportunity. A local women's foundation offered a grant. They wanted to turn the back room into a permanent community center for women over 60. A safe haven. A space to be seen. I signed the papers with trembling hands. Not because I was nervous. Because I had never signed something that felt like mine. Stephen built his empire to feel powerful. I built a room where discarded women came back to life. Come back for Chapter 8. Because sometimes, revenge isn't fire and fury. Sometimes it's hope, and healing, and knowing they'll never get to silence you again. And if this story touches you, like it, share it, subscribe. Not just for me, but for the women who were told their voices stopped mattering after 60. We're just getting started. Chapter 8. He showed up at my door. It was a Sunday morning. The bookstore was closed. I'd just brewed my tea when I heard the knock. I knew it was him before I even looked through the peephole. Stephen. He looked older, thinner, not in the graceful way some men age, but in that hollowed-out, sleep-deprived way of someone who's lost control of the world he used to command. I didn't open the door right away. Instead, I stood behind it, just listening to his breath on the other side. That nervous inhale, that heavy sigh. Then he spoke. "Lorraine, I know I've made mistakes." Mistakes? That's what he called throwing me out like trash after nearly 4 decades? I opened the door, but only halfway. He tried to smile, like the past year could be erased with charm. "You look good," he said. I didn't respond. "Can I come in?" he asked. No, he hesitated. "Please. I'm not here to argue. I need to talk to you. Things aren't good." I let him speak. That was my power now. I could choose when to give silence and when to let words hang. He said the business was collapsing. That suppliers were suing him. That his lawyer had quit. That my refusal to lift the freeze on the joint account had cost him nearly everything. He didn't come for closure. He came because he was losing. "I just need your help," he said. "If we could release the funds, even temporarily, I can rebuild." I looked him straight in the eyes. And then, calmly, I said, "You left me in a motel with nothing but a suitcase. You told our children I was unstable. You took my voice for years. Why should I help you now?" His face twitched. "Because you're better than this," he said. I laughed. Not bitterly. Just amused. "No, Stephen. I'm exactly who you made me." He started to cry. Whether it was guilt or fear of being ruined, I didn't know. I didn't care. "You have no idea what it's like to be 67 and feel like no one will ever look at you again," I told him. To be called a burden. To be erased. He dropped his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But it was too late. I closed the door on him, not with anger, with peace. Because that's when I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something better. I had a life without him. Come back for Chapter 9. Because just when you think the story's done, the world has one more twist waiting for you. And please, if you've ever let someone back in just because they cried at your door, share this. Like it. Subscribe. Because forgiveness is your choice, not your obligation. Chapter 9. My daughter came crying. It wasn't even a week later when the second knock came. This time, I expected it. I knew Stephen wouldn't come alone forever. Because when a man like that runs out of cards, he starts sending the ones who still believe he's worth saving. It was my daughter, Erica, the same daughter who hadn't returned my calls, who told me to stop being dramatic when I said I'd been left homeless, the one who sided with him. She looked different now, hair frizzy, eyes swollen, a heaviness in her face I hadn't seen since she was a child and wrecked her first bicycle. "Mom," she said, as if my name had weight for her again. "Can I come in?" I didn't speak. Just opened the door and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, taking in the creaky apartment, the books stacked on every surface, the scent of chamomile in the air. "This is where you've been?" she asked. I nodded. Her eyes filled with tears before the apology came. "I didn't know what he did to you." I said nothing. "I thought you were just overwhelmed. That maybe you were having a breakdown." That's what he told us. That you were acting unstable and wanted attention. That word again. Unstable. It's amazing how men use it like a hammer to silence women they've exhausted. She sat on the edge of my sofa like she didn't deserve to be comfortable. "Now he's blaming me," she said. "Says I should have convinced you to sign. He's losing everything. Investors pulled out. The mortgage is 3 months overdue. And the truth is, Mom, we're scared." I stared at her, this grown woman I once rocked to sleep, wondering when the world had taught her that loyalty belongs to power, not love. "Why are you really here, Erica?" I asked. She wiped her tears. "Because I think I made a mistake. And I didn't come to fix him. I came because I need you." That hit hard. But I couldn't let it melt me. "Not yet. You chose comfort over truth," I said. "You believed the man who told you I was losing my mind instead of the woman who raised you." She sobbed. "I know. I'm so sorry." I was scared. I didn't want to believe it. And then she said something I didn't expect. "Can I come to the bookstore meeting next week? I don't want to just apologize. I want to understand what I missed." For a moment, I saw the daughter I remembered. The one who used to beg me for bedtime stories. The one who cried when I first went gray and told me I was still the prettiest woman in the world. I nodded. "Come early," I said. We set up chairs together. She smiled through her tears. "Come back for chapter 10. Because the worst betrayals don't always come from strangers, and sometimes healing means letting someone try again, even when they don't deserve to. And if this story resonates with your truth, even just a little, please like, share, and subscribe. Because forgiveness may not erase the past, but it can rewrite the ending. Chapter 10. The circle grew wider. That Tuesday, Erica showed up early. She wore no makeup, carried a tray of pastries, said nothing as we arranged the folding chairs in the back of the bookstore, just quietly helped, like she knew she wasn't here to be forgiven, but to earn it. At first, the other women eyed her with suspicion. That's the thing about the whisper circle. We don't judge, but we don't forget. Most of us had been betrayed by people who once looked at us with love. We all carried that wound behind our smiles. But when it was her turn to speak, Erica stood in front of the group, her mother's daughter, trembling but brave, and told them everything. How she had ignored my calls, believed Stephen's lies, chose the safety of denial over the discomfort of truth. Then she said something that silenced the room. I thought growing up meant protecting the parent who was still strong. I didn't realize, sometimes the one who's been quiet the longest is the one holding all the weight. One by one, the women began to nod. Not because they forgave her, but because they knew what it felt like to be unseen by their own children. Her words were a mirror. And in that moment, something shifted. The whisper circle was no longer just for women who'd been hurt. It became a place for the ones who wanted to heal the hurt they'd caused. That night, we stayed longer than usual. Someone brought soup. Someone else played old records on a dusty player we found upstairs. And for a few brief hours, we weren't survivors. We were women reclaiming joy. Later, as Erica helped me wash mugs in the bookstore kitchen, she whispered, "You were always the strongest person I knew. I just didn't see it until he tried to break you." I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I simply said, "Now you do." She kissed my cheek before leaving. A small thing. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like obligation. It felt like home. Come back for chapter 11. Because sometimes, the daughter who walked away comes back and brings the light with her. And if this story feels even a little like your own, please like it, share it, subscribe, because no woman deserves to feel like she raised the world only to be forgotten by it. Chapter 11. The Auction Notice. The letter arrived folded in half, tucked under my apartment door. At first, I thought it was another message from one of the women in the group, or maybe a thank you note from the foundation. But when I opened it and read the stamp in bold red ink, my hands turned cold. Notice of public auction. Property foreclosure. 1149, Marlowe Lane. Stephen's house. Our house. The same one I raised our children in. Decorated for Christmas. Painted every spring. The same house he told me I wasn't welcome in anymore. It was going up for auction. Repossessed by the bank. I stared at the letter, my heart thudding, not from sorrow, but from a strange cocktail of disbelief and vindication. He had really lost everything. All those years, he acted like he was the king of his castle, with me as the dutiful shadow trailing behind. But it turns out, without that shadow, his whole world collapsed. A week later, I passed by the old neighborhood on the way back from the women's center. Out of curiosity, maybe closure. I didn't stop, just slowed as I drove by. The lawn was overgrown. The paint was peeling from the front porch. No one was home. I imagined Stephen inside, crouched over a stack of unpaid bills, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. And for a moment, I did feel something like pity. But pity's a slippery thing. If you let it take root too deeply, it becomes guilt. And guilt has no business living in the heart of a woman who's been wronged. Later that evening, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my son. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner." I didn't say anything. "I know you've heard about Dad. The house, the business, it's all gone. He's staying with me and Lindsay now. And I guess we're just trying to figure things out." Still, I said nothing. I should have checked on you when he left. I believed him. I shouldn't have. Then he said it. The question I'd been waiting for. "Is there any way you can help?" Just a loan. Something to get him through the next few months. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said, "Why don't you ask the woman he left me for?" Dead silence on the other end. "I can't," he finally muttered. "She's gone. Took what she wanted and disappeared." How poetic. "I'm sorry, son," I said. "But I'm not in the business of rescuing people who destroyed me." Then I hung up. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes the only way to finish a chapter is to close the book entirely. Come back for chapter 12. Because this is where we begin again, not just to survive, but to truly live. And if you've ever been asked to help the very people who hurt you, do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe. Because your kindness is a gift, not a given. And you don't owe it to those who never returned it. Chapter 12. The Day I Laughed Again. It started with a joke. A silly one, really, told by Mary, the 72-year-old former teacher who always brought lemon drops to the whisper circle. We were sitting in the bookstore's back room, sipping lukewarm tea, when she said something about how her ex-husband used to call her too emotional, and now he cries every time the stock market dips. The room erupted with laughter. Not polite, pitiful chuckles. Real laughter. Mine was the loudest. I laughed until my cheeks ached, until my eyes watered, until something inside me cracked open and poured light again. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't laughing to keep from crying. I was laughing because I wasn't crying anymore. I hadn't realized how long it had been. How deeply the sadness had burrowed into my bones. I had carried grief like it was a second skin, so long, I forgot what joy felt like. But that day, surrounded by these women, each with their own scars, each still standing, I remembered. And it wasn't just laughter that returned. Hope did too. We started organizing more than meetings. We held workshops, how to manage your own finances, how to write a will, how to spot signs of emotional abuse. We got sponsors, donors, volunteers. The Whisper Circle became the second chapter foundation. Local news came. A national podcast interviewed me. They called it the Uprising of the Forgotten Women. I didn't flinch at the word forgotten anymore. I owned it. Because what the world forgets, we remember for each other. One day, while cleaning the front window of the bookstore, I saw a woman across the street staring. Gray-haired, hunched, holding a cane. She looked tired. I walked out and handed her one of our flyers. She read it in silence, then looked up at me with eyes that carried decades of being ignored. "Is it really free?" she asked. "Completely," I said. "Because you've already paid enough." She smiled. That night, I stood in the bookstore, lights low, music playing from a dusty old speaker, and looked around. 27 women. All of them over 60. All of them breathing easier now. And, for a brief second, I thought of Stephen. Not with anger. Not with regret. With nothing. He didn't exist in this chapter anymore. Come back for chapter 13. Because healing isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far more powerful. And if this story has made you feel seen, even just a little, like it, share it. Subscribe. Because laughter, real laughter, is the sound of survival. And sister, you've survived. Chapter 13. The Woman in the Green Hat. She walked in just as we were finishing a session on financial safety. Green hat. Long coat. A face I didn't recognize, though something about her posture, stiff and guarded, felt all too familiar. She sat in the back, didn't speak, just listened. But when everyone left, she lingered near the shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of forgotten books. I approached gently. "First time." She nodded. Then, barely above a whisper, said, "I wasn't sure I deserved to be here." I tilted my head. "Why wouldn't you?" She swallowed hard. "Because I stayed with him. Even after what he did. I stayed too long. And now I feel ashamed." That word. Ashamed. It clings to us like wet clothes, doesn't it? Especially when the world expects us to be grateful just for being allowed to exist past 60. I pulled out a chair, gestured for her to sit. "You're here," I said. "That's all that matters." Her name was Norma. 68. Her husband, now in a nursing home, had spent 40 years controlling every dollar, every decision, every conversation. When he got sick, her children moved in not to care for her, but to manage his pension and estate. And just like that, Norma became invisible in her own house. "I had to ask permission to buy my own shoes," she whispered. By the time she finished, my hands were shaking. Not with anger. With recognition. Because all of us in that circle had once asked permission to speak, to spend, to exist. I handed her a copy of the Ledger of the Forgotten. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. "Your story belongs in here," I said. She looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "Do you really think I can still start over?" I smiled. "Norma, you're not starting over. You're starting finally." And something changed in her right then. Like a flicker of flame beneath years of wet ash. That week, she wrote her story. The next week, she read it aloud. And every woman in the room stood to hug her. Because that's what we do now. We raise each other. Come back for chapter 14. Because the more women who walk through that door, the more powerful the story becomes. And if you've ever felt ashamed for staying too long, don't. Just share this. Like it. Subscribe. Because it's never too late to reclaim your voice. Never. Chapter 14. The Letter from the Nursing Home. I hadn't heard his name in weeks. Stephen had disappeared from my thoughts like a ghost finally laid to rest, until one afternoon a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I knew better than my own. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page. No Dear Lorraine, no date, no closing line. Just 10 words, written in shaky, fading script. "If you can find it in your heart, forgive me." That was all. No explanation. No apology for the eviction. The lies. The cruelty. The decades of silencing me. Just a plea, scribbled in desperation. I learned later from my son that Stephen had suffered a stroke. Couldn't walk. Could barely speak. Confined to a bed in a nursing home with peeling paint, and linoleum floors. The woman he left me for? Gone. The empire he built? Gone. Even the children who once defended him had begun to see the cracks in the story they were sold. And now all he had left was a letter to the woman he used to belittle, asking for forgiveness like it was a spare coin he could beg for. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer. Not out of affection, but because his words didn't deserve my fire anymore. I didn't reply. Some people ask me if that was cruel. Maybe. But I'll tell you what's cruel, telling a 67-year-old woman that her best years are over. Leaving her in a motel with nothing but her wedding ring and a fractured heart. Cutting off her money, her dignity, and her place in the world, then expecting her to save you when your castle crumbles. That's cruelty, not silence. At our next Whisper Circle, I shared the letter with the group. Not to brag, not to vent, but because Norma had just received a message from her own son, asking for money. And Ruth had just been asked by her ex-husband to co-sign a loan. It's always the same, isn't it? When we have nothing, they leave us. When they have nothing, they remember we exist. But here's what's different now. We don't forget who we are anymore. Come back for chapter 15. Because silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And forgiveness. That's ours to give. Or not. If this sounds like your story, even just a little, please share it. Like it. Subscribe. Because women over 60 don't owe the world forgiveness. We owe ourselves freedom. Chapter 15. The proposal I turned down. It came in a crisp envelope, delivered by a courier. A formal letter, legal-looking. At first, I thought it might be something from the grant committee or another woman's foundation. But when I read the sender's name, my stomach clenched. It wasn't Stephen. It was his lawyer. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity outweighed my nerves. Inside, an official proposal. Carefully worded. Ridiculously polite. They were offering me a deal. If I signed to release the frozen business funds, just temporarily, they'd transfer partial ownership of the business into my name. A silent partner role. A title. A token. It was laughable. A man who'd told me I was nothing, now trying to make me something only because he had nothing left. It wasn't a proposal. It was a survival strategy. I sat at my desk and read it again. Not because I was considering it, but because I needed to see with my own eyes just how far he had fallen. And how far I had risen. Because here's what he didn't know. I didn't want his business. I didn't want his table scraps, his power plays, or his carefully drafted apologies dressed up in legalese. I had built something of my own now. Something real. Something that didn't require silence or submission or self-erasure. I didn't want to be a silent partner in a broken empire. I wanted to be the loud founder of a future where women like me were never discarded again. So I sent the proposal back. Untouched. But I did include a note. Just 5 words, handwritten on the back. I don't need your empire. That week, we held a celebration at the bookstore. The Second Chapter Foundation had officially helped its 100th woman find housing, counseling, or financial independence. We baked pies, played music, told stories under twinkle lights in the back room. And as I watched these incredible women laugh, cry, and dance, women who had once whispered through their pain, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe for a long time. I was finally, truly happy. Not because he was failing, but because I wasn't. Come back for chapter 16. Because peace doesn't come from punishing the past. It comes from building a future they never thought we were strong enough to claim. And if you've ever been offered something shiny to forget how deeply you were wronged, don't forget your worth. Like, share, and subscribe, because your power isn't in what they give you. It's in what you no longer need. Chapter 16. When the camera found me. The bookstore had just opened for the morning when the producer walked in. Late 30s, polished, holding a clipboard and wearing the kind of heels that click like confidence on hardwood floors. She introduced herself as Rachel, said she was from a documentary series about untold stories of resilience in older women. I read the article, she said, pointing to the framed newspaper clipping we'd hung behind the counter. And I think your story is something people need to hear. I almost laughed. My story? For so long, no one wanted to hear it, not my husband, not my children, not even the mirror most days. But I nodded. She came back 2 weeks later with cameras, lights, a sound crew. She asked if I'd be willing to do an on-camera interview. I'll be honest, I said. I'm not interested in being famous. Rachel smiled. You won't be famous, but you'll be seen. And that's what matters. The interview took place in the bookstore's back room. They placed me in front of the wall where we'd hung letters from the Whisper Circle. Behind me were years of survival, strength, and transformation, all taped up like holy relics. She asked me to speak as if I were talking to just one woman. One woman sitting alone in her house, wondering if her life was over just because someone decided she no longer mattered. And so I did. I told my story. Not with drama, not with bitterness, but with truth. I spoke of motel rooms and empty bank accounts, of being erased after 60, of how the cruelest thing Stephen ever did wasn't leaving, but making me believe I was worthless before he did. And I told them about this place, this circle, this movement, how I'd seen women walk in with shattered hearts and leave with fire behind their eyes. After the shoot, Rachel hugged me and whispered, "You've just given someone out there permission to take her life back." That night, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't anxious, I was alive. My phone rang just before midnight. It was Erica. "Mom," she said, her voice thick with tears, "I just watched your interview on their teaser page. I didn't even know they'd posted it yet. You were incredible." I sent it to my friends. Everyone's crying. There was a pause. Then she said, "I'm proud of you. Not because you survived, but because you built something beautiful out of the mess we left you in." I cried then, quietly, not from pain, from being seen. Come back for chapter 17. Because once your voice returns, the world doesn't just hear you. It listens. And if this story made you feel visible for even 1 second, please like it, share it, and subscribe. Because your voice doesn't fade after 60. It finally echoes. Chapter 17. The Woman from Across the Country. The message came through our website's contact page. Just a few sentences. No fancy introduction. No punctuation. Just emotion bursting through the keys. "My name is Elena. I'm 74. I just watched your story. I haven't left my house in 6 months. You gave me hope. Please don't stop telling the truth." I sat with that message for a long time. I thought about Elena, sitting alone, in some town I'd never seen, wearing slippers that used to belong to her husband or her sister or her past self, watching a video on her phone or an old tablet, holding her breath, waiting to see if someone in this world still understood what it meant to feel invisible. And somehow, across miles and silence, she found me. She found us. I replied immediately. Not with anything formal, just the truth. You're not alone anymore. You never were. Come join us. We'll wait for you. She wrote back the next day. Elena was from Oregon. Widowed. 2 sons who stopped calling when she refused to sell the family home. She hadn't had a visitor in months. Said she sometimes forgot what her own voice sounded like. So I mailed her a package. Inside, a Whisper Circle journal, a list of our writing prompts, a personal letter, and a bookmark that read, "Your second chapter starts the moment you decide you're worth more than their silence." She called me a week later. We talked for 2 hours. She laughed. She cried. She asked if we were real or just something she dreamed up to feel less alone. I promised her we were real. That women like us were everywhere, just waiting for someone to call us by our names again. A month later, Elena started her own Whisper Circle in a library basement in Salem. 5 women showed up the first week, 14 the next. And just like that, our quiet rebellion spread beyond our little bookstore. It was no longer just my story. It was our story. And the best part? It was being written by women who were never supposed to speak again. Come back for chapter 18. Because a single voice can start an echo, but many voices, they make a movement. And if you've been waiting for a sign to tell your story, let this be it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, another Elena is waiting to hear that she still matters. Chapter 18. The ceremony they never expected. It started with an email from the mayor's office. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some automated message meant for someone else. But it wasn't. They'd read the article, seen the interview, heard about the second chapter foundation. And they wanted to honor us. Not just me, us. The women. The circle. The stories. They were holding a local civic awards ceremony for community impact. Quiet heroes, they called it. People who turned pain into purpose. And they wanted us to speak. I nearly said no. Because there was still that voice inside me, the one Stephen planted years ago that whispered, "You're not special. You're just background noise." But then I remembered Elena. And Norma. And Ruth. And Erica. And the dozens of other women who walked into our little bookstore with trembling hands and broken hearts. We'd become a lighthouse for the women who were told the storm was all their fault. So I said yes. We all wore white that night. Not because we were trying to make a statement, but because it felt like shedding the ashes we'd carried for too long. I stood on the stage with 5 other women behind me, our founding circle, the original survivors. And when I spoke, I didn't read from a script. I just told the truth. I was left in a motel at 67 with nothing. No home. No money. No voice. And everyone said I should start over. But what they don't tell you is that at our age, there's no starting over. There's only choosing not to disappear. The room was quiet. No coughing. No shuffling. Just breath being held. And then an ovation. The loudest I'd ever heard in my life. Reporters came afterward. People took pictures. Women approached me with tears in their eyes and said, "Thank you for saying the thing I never could." But the most unexpected moment? Stephen's nurse was there. She approached me quietly as the crowd thinned. "I care for him at the home," she said. "He watches your video on repeat. Says nothing. Just stares at the screen like he's trying to remember how to speak." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because that night, standing under the stage lights with a medal around my neck, I realized something powerful. He was watching me now. But he wasn't the one holding the camera. Come back for chapter 19. Because just when they think we've faded, we shine brighter than ever. And if you've ever been told you're too old to matter, please like this story, share it, and subscribe. Because your light? It doesn't dim with age. It only waits for you to stop hiding it. Chapter 19. The day the bank called me. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky outside was gray, the kind of quiet overcast that makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and forget the world exists. I was sipping coffee when the call came in. The number was familiar. The bank where Stephen and I once held our joint business account. The one I'd frozen months ago. I hesitated. Thought about letting it ring. But I picked up. "Mrs. Hale," the woman said gently. "I just wanted to confirm your most recent directive. You've formally closed the account. You've transferred the balance to your new nonprofit. Just making sure that was you." I blinked. It was done. All of it. The last legal thread between me and Stephen had been snipped. My name was no longer buried beneath his. My finances, my records, my choices, they were mine now. Not managed by his assistant. Not signed under duress. Not whispered about behind closed doors. Just mine. I walked to the mirror. Stared at the woman reflected back. 68 years old. Once discarded. Now in command. Once invisible. Now in headlines. Once called too emotional. Now called executive director. I laughed out loud. Not from irony, but from the deep, satisfying fullness of freedom. That same day, a check arrived in the mail. A donation. Anonymous. But the note attached read, "From someone who once took everything for granted. You were never the problem, you were the foundation." I don't know if it was from Stephen. Or from one of the children. Or from a stranger who saw the documentary. But it didn't matter. Because the message wasn't news to me. I was the foundation. And now I was building something far greater. That afternoon, I returned to the bookstore, our bookstore, and found a young woman waiting by the door. She was in her 30s, trembling, eyes red. "My mom just died," she said. "She used to talk about this place. I just wanted to see what she loved so much." I opened the door for her, led her inside, and without even asking her name, I said, "You're welcome here. Always." Because now, we weren't just lifting women who'd been forgotten. We were lifting their daughters, too. Come back for the final chapter, chapter 20, where we close this story not with grief, but with legacy. And if you've been with me all this way, please like this story, share it, and subscribe. Because this chapter might be mine, but the next one, it could be yours. Chapter 20, I was never meant to fade. I always thought I'd end my life quietly. Somewhere in a chair by a window, forgotten by the people I raised, spoken of only in past tense. She was kind. She was tired. She used to be someone. But I was wrong. Because this is how my life is ending, not quietly, not with sorrow, but with legacy. Today, I stood beneath a banner that read, "The Second Chapter Foundation, National Women's Summit." 300 women filled the old theater downtown. They'd come from every corner of the country. Some flew in. Some took buses. Some rode with strangers turned friends from our online support network. Every one of them had a story. Every one of them carried wounds no one had seen until now. And they came not just to be heard, but to honor the voices they'd once buried for the sake of peace, marriage, family, or fear. I stood on stage, holding the mic with hands that once trembled signing divorce papers. I looked out at that crowd and saw power. Not the kind that controls. Not the kind that dominates. The kind that rises quietly, then builds something no one can tear down. I was discarded at 67, I said. But I bloomed at 68. They clapped. I was betrayed by the people I loved the most. They nodded. But I survived. And then I did more than survive. I led. They stood. The applause that followed didn't feel like fame. It felt like returning to myself. And the best part? Erica was there, too, front row, recording everything on her phone, tears in her eyes. She wasn't there out of guilt. She was there out of pride. She now runs our outreach program for young women with aging mothers. She says every daughter needs to learn what she didn't, that love isn't just about honoring the past, but protecting the present. When I stepped down from the stage, I was surrounded by women. Some hugged me. Some cried. Some simply whispered, "Thank you." But the one that got me, the one I'll carry with me forever, was a frail woman in her 80s who pressed a note into my hand and said, "I thought it was too late. You showed me it never is." I opened her note hours later. It said, "You gave me a second life. I'm going to use it. And now, so am I. Because I was never meant to fade. And neither are you." Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of someone you love or someone you used to be, please like it, share it, subscribe. Not because I need the numbers, but because someone out there right now is sitting in silence, wondering if her story still matters. Let her know it does. Let her bloom, too.